Shocking news out of Provo, Utah, as BYU starting quarterback Jake Retzlaff has been accused in a civil lawsuit of sexual assault.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer at the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City and 13-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident BYU expert and insider, and as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and thank you once again to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Crazy news out of Utah and Salt Lake County in particular, as BYU starting quarterback Jake Retzlaff has had a civil lawsuit filed against him, accusing him, among other allegations, of sexual assault and rape. We are going to try and make heads and tails of this and lay out the simple facts on today's show, and then we will proceed at if Jake Retzlaff is unable to continue with his playing career in Provo, who might succeed him at quarterback for the BYU football program. That's how we're going to go about things today. So I am going to try and play this right down the middle. I'm going to try and play news anchor and just give you the news. I was as shocked and as horrified and stunned and every other adjective under the sun when this report hit yesterday that Jake Retzlaff, BYU starting quarterback, has been accused of battery, strangulation, sexual assault, and rape, as well as infliction of an emotional distress stemming from an incident on November 22nd, 2023. Jake Retzlaff has been accused by a plaintiff who is identified in the lawsuit as Jane Doe A.G. That is the way they identify the victim. That is not the victim's name. They have not been publicly identified as of the recording of this podcast. That could change in time. But the simple facts laid out before us here say that Jake Retzlaff has been accused, as I mentioned, in a civil lawsuit. Let's also acknowledge that civil lawsuit is very different from actual criminal charges. There have been no criminal charges. So this is going out Thursday, maybe late Wednesday night, May 21st / May 22nd. As of May 21st, May 22nd, there have been no criminal charges levied or filed against Jake Retzlaff. Civil lawsuits are a different matter. They obviously, in criminal matters, they have to deal with beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the level that you have to rise to in terms of filing charges and ultimately pursuing said charges in a court case. Under civil lawsuit guidelines, it's the preponderance of the evidence if it is whether you win or lose the case, depending on which side you are on. It's a different level that you have to rise to in terms of where you can win in this case. And it is currently a civil lawsuit. That is to be very clear about that. It is not a criminal proceeding at this point. Could that happen in time? Yes, it could. They obviously, the reports say that the victim, the alleged victim, had a rape kit administered a few days after this alleged incident. And we will see what comes out of that. That reporting still has yet to be followed up on, and we don't know the status of said rape kit, if it has been processed, etc. Other things we need to acknowledge here is that Jake Retzlaff has retained a very, very high-profile attorney who represented in, I think it was 2016 or thereabouts, former NBA star Derrick Rose. Now, Derrick Rose and two of his friends were sued under a civil lawsuit by Rose's ex-girlfriend, accusing him and his two friends of rape. Mark Bouty was the lawyer who stepped in and represented him. He was the defense counsel in that. And Derrick Rose and his two friends were ultimately exonerated by an 8-person jury in the case in Los Angeles. Mark Bouty has got a long reputation and has represented a number of high-profile individuals, particularly in the entertainment sphere and in sports sphere. So Jake Retzlaff has retained high-level representation in this. And that brings me to this. I was among others in the media corps around BYU who were sent an email. It was the first statement we got shortly after these accusations were levied. It came from Mark Bouty, and I have to say the pronunciation I am using comes from KSL TV. I'm going off their pronunciation of their report. So if I butcher Mr. Bouty's name, I apologize. I am following the lead of my compatriots at KSL. But Mr. Bouty, I'm throwing this up on YouTube. If you're watching this, you'll see the statement on your screen. It says this, quote, I am counsel for Jake Retzlaff. I have met him, and he is a nice young man. He is also factually innocent, and we look forward to proving that innocence. Jake's focus this year will be on football. We don't try cases in the media. We will respect the process and establish Jake's innocence through the judicial system, unquote. Doing my due diligence as a journalist, I also reached out to BYU asking if they had a statement they wanted to issue on the matter. That came just before 4 p.m. Mountain Time on Wednesday, and they said this, quote, BYU became aware that a civil lawsuit involving Jake Retzlaff had been filed this morning. The university takes any allegation very seriously, following all processes and guidelines mandated by Title IX. Due to federal and university privacy laws and practices for students, the university will not be able to provide additional comment, unquote. So that brings us to, we have a high-profile attorney representing and being retained by Jake Retzlaff. We have the allegations from that incident stemming from November 22nd, 2023. And we have BYU obviously invoking that Title IX is involved in all of this. And when Title IX gets involved, there is going to be a discovery process. There are going to be extra investigations into all this. There will be a total preponderance of all of the evidence out there. And reading, and this is my personal interpretation. Maybe I'm not just reporting the news. Mr. Bouty's statement to me screams that Jake Retzlaff and his representation fully intend on fighting this and taking it to court. That is the way that statement reads to me, because factually innocent, that screams to me that they plan on laying out a case that they believe will ultimately exonerate Jake Retzlaff of these charges. Now, also in this report included what I consider to be a fairly, I consider it egregious, but that the Provo Police Department has been alleged in this incident to have, I guess you would say, encouraged, I don't want to say encouraged, but was alleged to have told the victim here that not to pursue any legal recourse. Now, Provo Police Department issued a statement. I'm going to share this on you up here so you guys can see it as well. If I can get this to pull up so you can see the whole thing, but so the statement comes from Provo Police, and I'm going to read it in its entirety. And they fire back on the accusations that officers encouraged the victim not to pursue legal action in this matter. The quote says, quote, the Provo Police Department is aware of a civil suit involving an allegation of rape made by an anonymous plaintiff against a BYU football player. Provo Police Department has not been served any legal filing relating to this civil case. The civil suit involves enough detail of the alleged assault for the department to identify a possible correlating case report. Our records show that on November 27th, 2023, our department received a phone report from a woman with the initials AG who gave a similar account. She was treated with courtesy and care. The complainant in that case was given several opportunities to identify her abuser. She declined to do so, as is her right, and the case was subsequently closed. Collected evidence was examined and revealed no actionable investigative leads. I think that's the key statement in all of this. But continuing, because of the civil suit does not identify the victim, we cannot be certain our police report is the same incident referenced by the plaintiff, but it does seem likely given the information we have. Continuing, the civil suit states that Provo police personnel discouraged the victim from proceeding by telling her there is no justice for victims of sexual abuse. From everything we have reviewed, this is not true. We have a team of dedicated investigators and victim advocates whose sole mission is to provide justice to victims of sexual abuse. They do not send people away, warning them there is no justice for victims. Our Special Victims Unit investigations regularly result in criminal accountability for offenders. We hope the plaintiff chooses to make a statement to further criminal investigation if desired. We will continue to assist and serve all victims of abuse, unquote. There is no way that this is going to be finalized or resolved soon. I'm sure that some of you out there would like to think, Jake, how soon this could stretch out months, to be very blunt. I am not a legal expert. I do not proclaim to be. I did not go to law school despite my mother's wishes when I was a younger man. But when you have Title IX involved, you have police looking into this. I would imagine they will potentially reopen their investigation if so desired, as I mentioned, from this victim. There will be what appears to maybe be a trial with Mark Bouty and Jake Retzlaff and this victim. This screams to me this is going to stretch on for weeks, if not months, and we are today 100 days away from the start of the BYU football season. So buckle up. It is going to be a summer full of legalese, court proceedings, and who knows what else. But the bigger question I want to address next is where does this put BYU football? Like what is next for Kalani Sitake and his program as QB1, their starting quarterback, the guy who led them to an 11-2 record a season ago and a top 15 ranking, and it appeared everything looked on the up and up for BYU. Where does this leave BYU football? We'll delve into that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys with the NBA playoffs in full swing. Every night is delivering highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and the best part is you have can't-miss moments that you will never forget. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action than with doing it with our friends at FanDuel. It makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and even live during the action with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big along the way. The best part is while the games are going on, you can combine your live prop bets mid-game based on how the action is unfolding. If you've got a feeling about one of these players you think is going to go off, why not back it up with a same-game parlay? Or how could a $200 bonus in bets add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits? It's as simple as that today. So if you're new to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you guys are having a good Thursday, all things considered. I know there's a bit of a gloomy shadow over Cougar Nation with the report yesterday, but where does this leave BYU football? I hesitate to try and say, but from my vantage point, like I said, I've been covering BYU for well over a decade at this point. This is not a good position for BYU to be in because you are going to spend now, as I mentioned, there are 100 days, officially 100 days from today, BYU is scheduled to kick off their football season against Portland State at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. Over the next 100 days, there is going to be a shadow cast over this program because of the situation involving Jake Retzlaff. Could BYU ultimately decide to suspend him until court proceedings play out? Yes. Have they done that as a recording of this podcast? No. Could that change in the next 5 minutes? It feels like yes. But regardless if he's suspended or if he's not, or expelled from school, honor code gets involved. That's the other, I guess, facet we should need to involve here is that the honor code as well. It's a fairly stringent standard that BYU expects their students to abide by, and they sign a contract saying they will abide by these rules. It is going to drag out, and it is obviously going to cast a shadow over this program for the next few months leading up to this football season. It's not something you want to have with your program. It's not something that BYU wants. If you want to look at history as a precedent, if that's what you're looking for here, here's the two that I can think of right off the top of my head. 2011, Brandon Davies gets a young woman pregnant. They're not married. Ultimately decides to step away from the program, is suspended from school, and in what some believe scuttled a potential Final Four team led by Jimmer Fredette. Had he been playing, they very well may have made a deeper run than just the Sweet 16 that year. That is one thing. You can go back to 2004. I think that was the final season of Gary Croton's tenure at BYU. Even before training camp, fall camp started that year, he had, I think, I want to say 8 or 9 players accused of sexual assault. The resulting case from that alleged assault convened the first grand jury in Utah County history. The precedent in all this is, I think, not going to hold up, at least in this circumstance. We have never had as high a profile, it feels like, player, in my opinion. Brandon Davies is a really high-profile player. The players who played for BYU on that football program in 2004, yeah, they're BYU football players. They have a high profile. But we are talking about QB1, If there is a more famous person on Brigham Young University's campus than the starting quarterback for the BYU football program, I'd like to meet him. And you can throw AJ DeBonce at me, but I'm talking traditionally, historically speaking. QB1 is the big man on campus, the BMOC in Provo, Utah. And now he is facing a civil lawsuit accusing him of strangulation, accusing him of sexual assault and rape. And it's an ugly situation to find your program mired in here. You add the fact that BYU is a church-sponsored institution, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. BYU is and the church also, to that respect, are very image conscious, and they do not want the reputation sullied. Likewise, they don't want their athletes or their students, those individuals' reputations to be sullied if they don't need to be. There is a lot of just lose all the way around. I'm talking for every party involved in all this. And that's the tough part this puts the BYU football program in, is because what is Kalani Sitake? What does he come out and say? He is scheduled to have our annual media golf tournament next month. Well, if this is not wrapped up by then, what is he going to say then? What are other coaches expected to say when they go on in recruiting trips, media appearances, everything else where they can be on the record or be asked about this? How are they supposed to respond? It is a very, very sticky and tricky situation that this program is now stuck in. And I do not envy anybody in this circumstance. It is not pretty. And I hate, quite honestly, I abhor having to talk about stuff like this. But I have to report the bad along with the good. I can't just be Mr. Hunky-Dory, all's well. All is not well in Provo, Utah right now. All is not well at BYU. This is serious stuff. And I am genuinely curious to see how things ultimately proceed here. As I mentioned, could Jake Retzlaff face expulsion from school? Yes. Could he be suspended for a period of time? Yes. Could he have BYU decide to let him continue to practice and play so long as there's no criminal proceedings or charges levied against him? That could also be the course of action they take. I just don't think that there is precedent for this. Like I said, you can look at history, and as I mentioned, the Brandon Davies situation and then that gang rape allegation in 2004. Those are really the two most high-profile things that I could think of as I was preparing for this podcast. But in this day and age, and the way that BYU operates now, like I said, back in the day, BYU would acknowledge if a player was under honor code investigation or being suspended. They have essentially changed all of the bylaws in the university handbook, as I understand it, to shield students and in particular athletes from having to answer that question. That's why that statement from BYU, I can throw it up again here. It says, the university takes any allegation very seriously following all processes and guidelines mandated by Title IX. Title IX is a federal statute. We're talking about feds getting involved here potentially as well. They also say this: due to federal and university privacy laws and practices for students, the university will not be able to provide additional comment. So I guess I should answer my own question. It's probably going to be a whole lot of no comment from Kalani Sitake. Is he going to be asked the question? You better believe it. It's going to be asked. We would not, speaking as a media member, we would be not doing our due diligence without asking about it. And nobody's going to be comfortable with this. Nobody is happy about this. It is a black eye across the board. And the alleged victim, you feel awful for them because in the lawsuit alleges that she's had PTSD stemming from the incident. And I can understand that. It can cause a lifetime of all kinds of issues. And the situation at hand here is it's no good for anybody. I'm talking anybody in this. And the no good is relative and fits differently for different people. But it is a very, very tough and sticky situation that the BYU football program finds itself in here. And I just don't think that there is a quick or, quite frankly, an easy way out of the situation. That's the other tough part about this. So that brings us to this. If Jake Retzlaff is unable to be QB1 for BYU this fall, who steps in? Who is going to be the guy that leads BYU into one of the more highly anticipated seasons in BYU football history, coming off an 11-2 campaign, coming off a top 15 ranking, coming off being that close to the college football playoff? Who would be the guy, in theory, that steps up and is tabbed to lead BYU forward? We'll try and answer that question next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. All right. And I said the big IF, if Jake Retzlaff is no longer QB1 in Provo, Utah, and this is hypothetical right now. This podcast is going to be one that is going to be remembered for some time, it feels like. But the question is, if Jake Retzlaff is unable to continue as BYU starting quarterback, who is going to assume the mantle as being QB1 in Provo, Utah? Well, as things stand, as of the recording of this podcast, so May 22nd, 2025, there are 4 candidates currently inside the BYU football program, inside that quarterback room, that were lining up behind Jake Retzlaff. Number 1, McKay Hillstead, the former the former Skyridge star, played at Utah State for a year before transferring to BYU, and has been a guy that is impressed from all reports, and from what I've seen is shown a great ability. He's got Division I starts at Utah State. Right there alongside him, Trayson Bourget, the former prep star out of Arizona. He spent time at Western Michigan, also getting D1 starts as a freshman before transferring to BYU. They were the 2 guys alongside Jake Retzlaff who were in spring camp this year. And as I mentioned, both have Division I experience, albeit at the G5 level. I figured those 2, if Jake Retzlaff is unavailable to the BYU football program this fall, those 2 figure in my mind to be the odds-on favorites to start for the BYU football program. They would have a derby, in a training camp, and I think the best man wins, and they would be tabbed as QB1. Other options out there: Bear Bachmeier, 4-star talent, recent transfer in from Stanford. He is a 6'2", 225-pound just specimen of an athlete. Can he pick up the BYU playbook fast enough? And can he impress enough in would be a 3-week span during training camp to pass by McKay Hillstead or Trayson Bourget and become QB1 in Provo in a very, very short amount of time? The option exists there. The 4th man in the mix, or the 4th player in the mix, is Emerson Geilman, a prep star who led Bountiful High School this past season to a state title, has a ton of physical tools, but he is an 18-year-old true freshman, fresh out of high school. Is expecting him to come in and rise to the top of the depth chart, much like Bear Bachmeier in maybe 2 or 3 weeks in training camp. Is that too much to ask? Probably. So you have 4 options. The other option still exists out there. Is there a quarterback in the transfer portal that BYU maybe had their eyes on that they may add in the circumstance that they find out that Jake Retzlaff just simply is not available? Whether that's via suspension, expulsion, various means, he could be unavailable to the BYU football program. They could add a transfer portal quarterback, but this late in the cycle, I'd be very doubtful that there is a difference maker type player at quarterback that's still available in the portal that could come in and, as I mentioned, surpass 2 guys that have got years of experience in this BYU offense, most notably, like I said, McKay Hillstead and Trayson Bourget. Aaron Roderick, BYU's offensive coordinator, has been very quick to point out that having the depth that BYU has at quarterback is a luxury because, as he mentions, he has 3 quarterbacks, or at least he had 3 quarterbacks. I'm assuming Jake Retzlaff, he gets aced out of this conversation. But he has at least 2 quarterbacks who, beyond Jake Retzlaff, have Division I starts at the FBS level. That cannot be discounted. McKay Hillstead has played football against other Division I teams. Same thing with Trayson Bourget. That, in this circumstance, as awful as it is, because like I said, this casts a pall, a shadow over this football program that is going to last, it feels like, for quite some time, unless they somehow come to a very quick resolution, but that does not seem likely in this circumstance. The one saving grace is that both Hillstead and Bourget have experience, and they can bring that to the BYU football program. Is it an easy switch to switch out a guy who's got 17 career starts and just led you to an 11-2 campaign capped off by a just truly impressive performance in the demolition that they had in over Colorado in the Alamo Bowl? No, that is not going to be easy, but this is how the chips may fall for BYU, that they have to pick between McKay Hillstead or Trayson Bourget. Let me insert here. This is Jake Hatch's opinion. I am not a coach at BYU. I am a media member. I do a podcast, as many of you can tell, in a closet under the stairs in my house. Yes, I call it my closet under the stairs. I am a Harry Potter fan. Roast me if you want in the comments. My personal opinion on the matter is that right now, 100 days out, if Jake Retzlaff is unavailable to play for BYU football this fall, McKay Hillstead, the hometown kid, grew up in Springville, played at Skyridge. He's not the biggest quarterback in the world, but he's lightning quick and shows a really, really nice touch with his arm. I believe that McKay Hillstead would ultimately end up becoming the starting quarterback for BYU. Now, could he prove ineffective and could he be replaced? Absolutely. I think that BYU would go into the season potentially even carrying on through the non-conference slate. As I mentioned, they open up against Portland State 100 days from now. The following week, they take on Stanford, and then they travel to East Carolina. BYU, in theory, could use those 3 non-conference games as a trial period of sorts to really see if it's Hillstead or Bourget, if they feel like those two have proven themselves. Or if Bear Bachmeier, if his talent is as good as advertised, he could enter that conversation. It could be a 3-way battle. I can't count on anybody in this circumstance, but the tough part about it all is just simply acknowledging the fact that BYU could be out without a guy that they were wholly counting on to lead this BYU offense that has a lot of weapons. They've got at least two very capable running backs. They've got multiple wide receivers. They've got a tight end core, a tight end in particular in Carson Ryan, that they really think could rehabilitate the image of tight ends. They've got a offensive line that's been revamped a little bit, but they still feel like it is going to be very, very capable of being a force for this BYU offense. And to not have the guy who you figured was going to be the guy under center leading you hopefully to glory in 2025, that is a tough and bitter pill to swallow. And that there is no, like I said, no easy way to go about this, but it's a conversation that needs to be had because precedent says the BYU, be as image conscious as they are, if there is any impropriety that on Jake Retzlaff's side of things, he very well could find himself, I said, suspended, if not expelled, or having to withdraw himself from school, which would ultimately cost him potentially his senior season. And that is extremely, extremely disappointing. I'm talking just stuff that I can't imagine. And it breaks my heart in many respects because I feel for the alleged victim here if something happened there, because I'm a dad. I've got a daughter. I've got 2 boys as well. Like, I don't want any of my kids ever wrapped up in any legal proceedings. And I can think of the parents in the circumstance, both from Jake's side and this alleged victim's side. I know that BYU's coaches look at their players as extensions of their families. Like, they think of them as their own sons. I don't mean to get emotional here, but this is a really, really hairy and uncomfortable position for everybody. I'm talking across the board. Nobody wants to be in this position that the BYU football program finds themselves in right now. And is there going to be a quick and easy resolution? No, there is not. And they have to now prepare for all options. That is potentially preparing for a season where you do not have the guy you expected to be under center leading your program that you thought potentially could lead you to a Big 12 championship, to the college football playoff. And now, as I mentioned, having to look at other options. And I think that, in my opinion, McKay Hillstead will be atop that list, at least from my vantage point. All right, that is it for today's podcast. But this will not, I can assure you, this will not be the last time we discuss a whole litany of different storylines, layers, whatever you want to term it, about this incident and the ramifications of it. But that's where things stand with the BYU football program. And it is going to be very, very touch and go, it feels like, for the next little bit as things ultimately proceed from here. And obviously we'll have it covered for you guys top to bottom right here on your daily podcast, the Locked On Cougars podcast. So before we go here, I just need to get my regular spiel in. Thank you for your support of the podcast. Apologies that today's show probably came off as much of a downer, but it's downer news. It's a really, really not good situation for BYU. But as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. And as always, thank you for being everydayers right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.